Hi, 11th and 12th. We're going to be doing the next few chapters in Words by Ginny Weitrop. We're on chapter 23 today, and we're going to be working straight through to chapter 35. We have gotten some really big action during this section of the book. I know it's pretty exciting. So when Sierra first takes the police up to where the cabin is, where she knows that Kaylee is located, they let her know that there were drug busts up there recently, that there's old logging roads that actually go through that area. So she goes up with them to show them, pinpoint exactly where the cabin is, because there's no street signs, there's no addresses up there. And she's told to stay behind. And while she's alone, she undergoes some moments of, I forgot the word of it. It's January 5th, the day of, it's like not inspiration, discovery. It'll come to me in about a second. I don't know why my brain does that. But she goes, epiphany. There we go. She goes through some epiphanies. She thinks about what her role is for Kaylee now. And at first she feels like, okay, I'm finished. I brought the police up here. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. And then her conscience, talking to her, she says, come on, Sierra, you've done your job. You found her. You brought in the authorities. Once I find the cabin, you're free of all this. That's what you want, right? And then she has to answer herself and say, no, that's not what I want. So she has an epiphany, that's the word, where she is looking at what does she really want out of this situation. And then she realizes that a lot of her clarity of thought is being disguised by fear. And she talks about fear incriminates. I love the way she writes this down, or author wrote this down. Fear incriminates. The child is wounded. She needs more than you can give. Like, you would never be able to provide enough for this child. Fear changes tactics when that doesn't work. If you let yourself care for her, love her, you'll get hurt. You don't need to lose another child. Don't give her your heart. And that argument traps her, because she realizes she's already given her heart to this little girl. And so as she's watching all of this going down, she being left behind, told to stay with the police, and then realizing that as the police surround this cabin, there's gunfire that blazes, and she sees Kaylee running out of the cabin. And at that point, Sierra doesn't care about what she was told to do, and she goes and grabs the little girl and pulls her away with her. So it's an instinctual thing where she has to go and grab Kaylee, who is running out of the house with her hands over her ears, the way she always does when that internal primal scream is happening. So she is now safe in the arms of Sierra, and that's really important for both of them, because Sierra needs that moment to realize that this is what she's supposed to be doing. And that is one of the things she learns about herself, is that she is supposed to be taking care of Kaylee. Kaylee, however, is in shock. Her feet are chewed up from running barefoot through the woods. And then as Sierra examines her, just briefly, just looking at her, because this little girl is just in really, really rough shape, she notices that there's bruises on her, that she has scratches on her belly, where it looks like Kaylee was trying to get away from someone who was trying to remove her jeans, which is exactly what was going on in that cabin. We can figure all that out now. And then we have in chapter 24, we have Kaylee's point of view, where she is trying really hard just to trying to figure out what is she supposed to do next, because Kaylee is still so tied to this cabin, because she believes that this is where her mother is going to come and get her. But she can't hold on to the picture, the mental image even of her mother, with every step that they take. And she describes it as an Etch-a-Sketch, which is really great way to picture this imagery of, with every bounce of the officer's step as he's carrying her toward the ambulance, is erasing a little bit of her memory of her mother, and realizing that she can't wait anymore. I love that phrase when she says, I can't wait anymore. And then in italics, she says, I'm sorry. she just wanted to wait for her mom for all this time, but her mom never came back. And now that she's being carried away, she just has to let go and allow somebody else to take care of her. So Kaylee gets put into the hospital, and right away, Sierra is right there at her side, helping her, giving her a drink, putting a hand on her forehead to check for her temperature. And that reminds Kaylee of this book that she remembered reading when she was even younger, of Mandy. I've never read Mandy. I should go ahead and get it and put it in my library for my grandkids. But she realizes that she's living the same way that she read it in this book, and she wonders if she's going to get everything else that Mandy got, which includes being taken home and being loved forever. And she wants that to be Sierra who takes care of her. But then also really worried about her mom. That her mom's issue is always in the back of her mind, that she's got to take care of her mom. She's got to wait for her mom. But she realizes that just having Sierra, touching her appropriately, having an adult showing her affection that's not perverted, sexual, mean-spirited, not the way this ex-boyfriend of her mom has been treating her, but the way a grown-up is actually supposed to treat a child. She finds that to be healing. That kind of touch is healing, and she feels like she's home. Okay, in chapter 25, we'll go back to Sierra's point of view, and she talks about surrealism. You hear surrealism a lot from college students. They get excited about this word and they start using it for everything. So generally, when you hear someone talk, that was so surreal, they're usually in college. But she's talking about the art movement, which was really important in the history of art. And surrealism was a 20th century movement of artists and writers to capture through use of fantastic images and incongruous juxtapositions of representation of unconscious thoughts and dreams. One of my favorite of the surrealists would be, well, you guys all know about Munch, who did the Scream, but there are several others. And I like how Sierra talks about the juxtapositions between her and Kaylee. She says, if I were going to capture this moment of me taking care of Kaylee on canvas, it would all be incongruous things that don't seem to go together, juxtapositions, but yet they're put together. The first incongruity is me. She is childless, single, independent woman. She was standing on the side of a dirt road, wringing her hands, her heart, her soul, as a child was loaded into the ambulance. We're going back to the cabin at this point for Sierra's point of view. We already have Kaylee in the hospital, but we're going back to Sierra's point of view. The second incongruity is Kaylee. Kaylee is motherless, independent, and then heartbreakingly, she is a quote-unquote adult in a child's body. She was taking care of herself. She was living a nightmare that really nobody should be living through, but way too young to be living that kind of nightmare. And here she is under duress, not really wanting to do this, but knowing that she needs to, making an adult decision to surrender herself into the care of other people because she cannot take care of herself. And she has to be mature enough, even as this little girl, to recognize, I can't do this anymore. I cannot take care of myself anymore. I have to walk away with these people who are going to take care of me. Okay, so Sierra, because Kaylee is being taken to the hospital, she goes and arrives at the hospital right after her and is immediately pegged as the mom. The nurse looks at her and says, are you her mama? It's the first thing that comes out of this nurse's mouth. And she's like, no, I'm not. She says, you look like a mama. And then at that point, Sierra starts putting stuff together. Well, I was a mom, but, and the nurse stops her right there and says, once you're a mom, you're always a mom. Now, we've already seen with Sierra that she's already acted like a mom for Kaylee with something as simple as taking the apple core, that little piece of trash, and putting it outside for her, this little girl that she's just met, and realizing that she's acting like a parent at this point. And then she is right there with Kaylee as Kaylee undergoes the rough part for her, the examination, having to be examined from head to toe and feeling almost violated because of all of the examinations. But you've got Sierra right there as her stand-in mom to say, I'm going to be here with you. And then she starts thinking over that phrase by the nurse saying, once a mama, always a mama. The truth of her words lingers. I became a mother the day Annie was born, and I assumed motherhood ended for me when she died. Yet the longings to love, nurture, and protect that her birth awakened in me didn't die with her. It's those longings, those desires I've worked so hard to bury all those years. She shouldn't have buried those. And now she realizes it's time for those emotions to resurrect and come back. So she does the next thing she can while Kaylee's being taken care of and cleaned up. She calls Ruby, her best friend, and says, I need you to come with me, help me out. And then she gets to meet the caseworker for Kaylee, this very tall man. If he can tower over Sierra's 5'11" frame, oh my word, I would love to be 5'11", but he towers above her. He's well over 6 foot, and she calls him a Viking. He must look like a Viking, red skin, very blonde. And he talks to her about Kaylee's case. And right away, Sierra wants to become a foster parent. She says, well, what do I have to do all that? And he tells her, normally what we do is we send them with an emergency family, somebody who's used to dealing with emergency situations like this. But you know, let's talk about you becoming the foster family. And so he gives her the first steps. Okay. While she's talking with him, Kaylee wakes up, and right away, Sierra forgets the cute looking Viking and goes right to Kaylee. She's there to take care of that little girl. That hers her primary thing. Let's see. We go into chapter 26, and we're at Kaylee's point of view, and she can overhear as Sierra and Ruby are talking, and Ruby is like, what is with you? It's never just a halfway measure with you. You get a dog, you get a dog. I mean, you just fall in love with the dog, you take care of the dog. The dog's now sleeping in Sierra's bed and all this other stuff. She says, but you finally start coming out of your shell after 12 years. You spent 12 years just beating yourself up, and now that you're out, and you're no longer beating yourself up, you're getting a dog, and now you're getting a kid? What in the world? And she's like, trust me, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so as Kaylee is listening to this, Sierra is talking, and she says, so Kaylee is listening without Sierra knowing. And Sierra says, God has a plan. Why not just go with it this time and see what happens? That's really different for Sierra. She's always wanted to have so much control, but now she's saying, I'm recognizing God's plan. God is in control. I believe that he's drawn Kaylee to me, drawn us together for his purpose. And then she kind of laughs at herself. Listen to me. I sound like my mother. Well, of course she does. Okay. And then Sierra kind of lets us know through telling Ruby that she does think the Viking is cute. So, too much in one day, a child and a man. Okay, so we finally get Kaylee waking up and letting them know she woke up. And finally, some communication. Now, we did a little bit of communication with Sierra in the woods, where Sierra had her sketchbook and a pencil, and Kaylee was able to use that. Now, Kaylee has her very own notebook. That may not seem like a significant thing, but when you think about Kaylee leaving behind everything, and this is something she didn't even have. When she used a pen, she had to use his pen. She had to go into his bedroom, a place that she hated, to go find his pen. In order to get paper, she had to tear off pieces of brown paper bags. So when she is handed a sparkly covered notebook and a sparkly pen with a star on top, that is her belonging. And that's something she didn't have before. All of this is new to Kaylee. So Sierra explains to her that she's been getting lots of fluids. She gives her the notebook. And the first thing Kaylee writes is, "Are these for me?" Yes, they are. And the two of them begin to write. But the second thing she says is, "May I keep these? Are they really mine?" She's not used to having her own things. And then she asks about what a social worker is. And then as they meet the social worker, he tells her, "We have started looking for your mom, just like you wanted us to." That was the promise they made. And it wasn't just a promise to get Kaylee to go with them to the hospital. They're serious about trying to find Kaylee's mom. Okay, so there's an investigation. Okay, so he asks Kaylee a question, and we don't get the exact question. We're supposed to figure it out. So I hope you did that. And she is pushing for Sierra to be able to take care of her. So Kaylee, who's told she might have to go to a foster family, first she thinks that's the last name, Foster. And then she says, "Well, what about Sierra?" She writes that down. "What about Sierra?" And then she says, "She is phenomenal." She really wants Sierra to take her in. And she is very responsible, letting him know that she really wants to be with Sierra. So, before the social worker leaves, he pulls Sierra aside and he says, "Listen, you need to let the night nurses take care of Kaylee. Let her sleep. Give her a little bit of space." And at first, Sierra takes that the wrong way and says, "Oh no, did she ask for space? Am I smothering her already? She's only had this little girl away from that cabin for 24, not even 24 hours. Like, oh no, am I doing something wrong?" And so she goes home still thinking about this. Her brain is just on overload. So she does some art. And then she is up and at the library when it opens because she has some things she needs to do for this little girl that she is taking care of as if she's a daughter, even if it's just emotionally at this point. So when she gets to the library, I actually love this little scene here between her and the librarian who opens the door for her. And then, Sierra's like, "Is the reference desk open?" And Wally's like, "Yep," and walks to the reference desk because she's the only librarian there at the time and knows immediately the phrases from the books that Sierra is asking about. Okay, I've never read Mandy. I wouldn't be able to help her with that one, but I could definitely help her with James and the Giant Peach. I love that book. It's amazing. If you haven't read it, you should. Anything by Roald Dahl. Go for it. So she gets for her James and the Giant Peach and Mandy by Julie Andrews, also known as Julie Edwards, as an author. And then gets her Little Women as well, which is a great book. Little older book. And then she takes the books to Kaylee, who has this huge breakfast in front of her. Food is important. This little girl's been starving for a long time. But did you see what happens when Kaylee sees the books? She forgets the food and puts her hands out like, "Yes, the books." And then she does something that people who aren't book nerds tend not to understand. Okay, but you could tell this was written by a book nerd because she wrote it out so beautifully. She takes the books. Her touch is gentle. She rubs one hand over each of the covers and then opens one of the books and holds it up to her nose and sniffs. Oh yeah, that's how book nerds get high. No, I'm kidding. That's a drug reference. I shouldn't say that. She closes the book and touches each one again. She fingers the pages and smiles at the pictures on the covers. Okay, every year for my birthday, I buy one book for every year I've been alive. So I actually like getting older because of that. I was so excited because this year I got to buy 53 books. Woo woo. And when I get home with my boxes of books that I've bought from various thrift stores and other used bookstores, and then, of course, regular bookstores, I go to Barnes & Noble too. I like to spread them all out, like on a table. And I like to look at all the titles at once. And I'm like, ooh, look at all the books that I just got. I live for that moment, okay? And sometimes that stack of books will stay on the table. I'll spread out for a couple of days while I'm looking at it and just kind of touching them. It's like so cool. And yes, as a book nerd, I have sniffed books. I've done it many times. I do it a lot. But I like it. I like the smell. And I'm not the only one. So I want to share with you a quote by my favorite fictitious librarian. You ready? Because it sums up so beautifully the smell of books. Oh, yeah, it's the stuff. This is by Rupert Giles. He says, smell is the most powerful trigger to a memory there is. A certain flower or a whiff of smoke could bring up experiences long forgotten. Books smell musty and rich. The knowledge gained from a computer, it has no texture, no context. It's there and then it's gone. If it is to last, then the getting of knowledge should be tangible. It should be smelly. I love that one. The episode that's from is probably one of the cheesiest episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer there is, but the quote, oh, book nerds unite. We love that quote. Okay. Getting back to the non-Giles quotes. But here we have this little girl. She's smiling. She's smelling the books. Yeah, I totally get where you're going. And then, weirdly enough, the first book she picks up is the one on redwoods that Sierra has gotten to research because she's creating this piece of art based on the redwood that Kylie was in. And then, of course, she falls asleep because she hasn't slept the whole night before. And Kaylee is so excited to get these books that even after Sierra falls asleep, she's looking through the books. And then when Sierra falls asleep, Kaylee starts looking at her and trying to read her, find out something about her. And while she's there watching Sierra, the Viking comes in, Peter comes in and starts to talk to Kaylee. And eventually Sierra wakes up and she goes and sits and talks with Peter as well. And when they do, and that brings us up to chapter 29, they go have coffee together and she has to open up and say, okay, this is what's gone on in my life. Because he said, there is a very good chance you could be a foster parent. There's going to be an inspection in your house this afternoon to make sure it's suitable for a child to be in. You'll have to go through a background check. And at that point, Sierra's demeanor changes. And he says, was there something I should know? And she says, yes. And she tells him all about her past, her drug use, the fact that she'd been pregnant during her drug use and as a result had a premature baby, and that baby died at 9 days old. And instead of saying, wow, you're a terrible parent, I'm not going to put a child with you, he says, have you had a relapse since then? Have you used drugs since? She goes, no, I've never touched that again. And at that point, he says, do you understand redemption? And she just looks at him like, redemption? Of course she knows what redemption is. She was raised in a Christian home where redemption is used all the time. Redemption means that somebody else is paying for your way. You've left behind who you are and you've accepted this gift instead. And he says, do you believe in redemption? She goes, yeah, it's when, and he says, I know what it is. And then he's like, 4:00 this afternoon. That's when your home evaluation is going to take place. He doesn't say, this is your chance to be redeemed. He just says, this is redemption. Do you know what redemption is? Yes, I know what it is. Good. That's what's happening to her right now. He doesn't have to spell it out for her. Okay. So when she gets home, her mom is there. And right away she's like, how does my mom know? It's this magical, mystical part of her mom who can say, I always know when my child needs me. And then it turns out that, her friend Ruby told her. And so they get the house ready for this time to get Kaylee here. And she has a time when she breaks down and explains to her mom, I don't know if I'm ready for all this. She says, not since Annie's death have I delved beneath the surface with my mom. So she has had a close relationship in the past. And then after her daughter's death, she doesn't really want to dig too deep. She saw as a friendship, it's very surfacey. But now she says, I think this is what I'm supposed to do, Mom. I think I'm supposed to be a mom. And her mom tells her, I've always thought you should be a mom. You're a great mom. You've always have been. and Sierra breaks down, cries for Kaylee's wounds. Okay, we've made it to chapter 30. I know, I'm excited. Kaylee says, I still can't believe it's true, but Pete nods his head and he says, do you want to live with Sierra? She goes, yes, big letters in her notebook. And then the two of them start this little game, her and Dr. Peter, where he will use a big word with her and then she will write a big word, like rapport is one of them. And he says, yes, Missy, you and Sierra share a close rapport. That means they can talk back and forth because, of course, Kaylee's writing it. And then finally, he says, I think Sierra will be a sagacious caregiver, sagacious meaning smart. And then Kaylee writes down, yes, she's perspicacious, meaning she understands. Okay. And he laughs and the two of them laugh together. And then finally, our next break is Kaylee gets to see her own room. Her own room. It was big when she got a notebook and a pen for herself, but now she also has her own room. Not just a mattress on the floor in what would be considered a living room. She has her own space, her own room, and it's beautiful. White curtains, white bedding, flowery pillows. And then she looks over at the bookcase, which is the most important piece of furniture in a house, and she sees her books are there, as well as some books that belonged to Sierra when she was younger. And so she's very excited to see all that. And then on the other things she sees is a backpack, just like Sierra's, but Sierra says, this is for you. You can fill it with whatever you want. This is yours. She's giving her a little bit of autonomy or independence here. Okay, and she starts reading Nancy Drew right away. I love Nancy Drew. Okay, in chapter 31, Sierra starts talking about her artistic ability, and she says, professionally, I'm known as a layerist. And again, we have this really wonderful idea of a metaphor being used from this art. To layer something, you have to make it deeper and deeper and deeper. You just add more and more to it. And so she uses newspapers and magazines to get colors and words, and she'll hide. She says, sometimes I'll find a word that means the opposite of what I want to say in the piece, and I'll bury it under layers. And then as she's doing this, she realizes that's been a metaphor for her whole life. She has had to build layers over her real feelings all of this time. And now, for the first time, she is peeling back the layers so that she can grow. And that's just a really beautiful metaphor. So she's longing to be able to hear Kaylee's voice, but she knows she can't. So she tries to ask her only yes and no questions. And there are little moments where the two of them can have a connection and they can have contact with each other without words. And a lot of that has to do with hair. And I know for the guys who are listening to this right now, you're going, oh, come on. It's already a chick book and then we're going to have hair thing going on. There is a moment, though, where she washes Kaylee's hair for the first time in the kitchen sink. And Kaylee is crying because for the first time, she's getting that tactile mother love. Even her own mom had an issue with touching her appropriately. Her mom had a tendency to be almost cruel. Remember when Kaylee would get knots in her hair? If she flinched, her mom would pull harder and tell her to knock it off. And Kaylee would try to stay as still as possible because she didn't want her mom angry. We got a little bit of an insight to what kind of mom her mom was. She wasn't a kind and fluffy bunny person. And then we have tears on the behalf of Sierra because she is able to perform a motherly task for the first time since her daughter passed. A normal activity. And then the grandmother is crying as well because she is shedding her tears because she's seeing her daughter heal and she's watching Kaylee becoming part of the family. It's a really important metaphor there for that moment in the family. And the hair issue becomes a motif in this book. When Kaylee gets up early in the morning, she wants to have connection, a proper connection with the person who now loves her. And so she will bring she will get the comb off of Sarah's nightstand and sit next to her in the bed first thing in the morning, and Sarah will comb her hair for her. Something that she's always, that allows her to feel mother love. Okay. I highlighted this on my digital copy because I thought it was so special and so important when we're talking about when Kaylee gets into bed with Sarah every morning and just kind of gets her back rubbed and then gets her hair combed. And Sarah says, I reach over and rub my hand up and down her back, feeling each bony knob of her spine. As I touch her, I'm aware that she is unaccustomed to being touched appropriately with love. And I pray my touch will be a healing balm. Children need physical touch. They need that physical connection with the people who love them. I have 4 grandchildren, and I love it when they snuggle. I love it. Now, they will get to a point where they feel like they're a little too old and too busy to want to snuggle with Mimi. But then I've noticed that only lasts for about a year, and then suddenly they want to snuggle again, because I think children get to the point where they realize that their snuggle time is drawing to an end. And so they want to get in as much as possible before that happens. I've seen that with my oldest grandson. So she explains to Kaylee, let's see. Oh, Kaylee on chapter 32. Sorry, we'll go that way. Kaylee says, I've forgotten a lot about how to live a normal life living in the cabin. And the thing that she mentions the most is manners or etiquette. And she says, I've read the book on etiquette, but I've never had to actually do that because he didn't have any manners. He wouldn't have expected etiquette. She lived in a place where there probably wasn't a table and chairs anyway. Well, just one chair. And so when she first starts eating and drinking and fellowshipping, talking, not really talking, but writing to Sierra, she realizes that she's really far behind where she's supposed to be developmentally. And she tries to learn very quickly how to behave properly, even though she can't talk. So she knows that when you sit down, you don't start eating right away. You wait till somebody says grace, and then you wait for that person to pick up the fork, and then you can eat too. And there was also a need for routine, which she really hadn't had before. And so she likes routine. She likes knowing what's going to happen next, because she's lived so long feeling like she didn't have any kind of routine. Like everything was up in the air. You never knew what was going to happen next. So she's told that she has to go to a doctor appointment, a follow-up appointment. And Kaylee right away is like, I don't want to go. Okay. And I highlighted this for a reason, because I think it needs to be talked about. She says, I felt my face get hot and tears rolled down my cheeks. I wondered if the doctor could tell. Would he know what he'd done to me? Would the doctor know what I was? Okay, Kaylee was told by the man that she was abandoned with in the cabin that she was a whore, and that only whores did the things that he did with her. He was molesting her, he was raping her, and then basically telling her that it was because that's what she was. She was a whore. And now that she's away from that really abusive, awful, disgusting situation, and she's getting ready to go to the doctor, she makes the assumption that the doctor is going to, when he examines her, he's going to determine that because she's been molested, that she is a whore. The reason I want to bring this up, and the reason I use that word, even though it is a very blatant kind of in your face kind of word, because that's what she was told, is because too many times people who have gone through abuse, whether it's physical, mental, or sexual, will blame themselves for the abuse in some way or another. They will make excuses for the person who abused them. There is no excuse for sexual, physical, mental abuse. There's none. If anybody is abusive to somebody else, that is their issue. It is not the person they've abused issue. Since we're talking about sexual abuse here, and because that seems to be the one that most people feel the most guilty about, even if they're the victim, I'm just gonna talk about that one. No one ever asks to be sexually molested or abused. No one asks to be sexually assaulted. That is not a thing. The way a woman dresses, the way she puts her makeup on, the way a boy dresses, the way he wears his hair, the way he wears his clothes, none of that is an invitation to be sexually assaulted. That is a lie. That people are sexually assaulted because of the way they dress or even the way they act. No one asks for that. It is not okay. If someone has touched you, sexually assaulted you, and tried to make you feel like it was your fault, they are liars. What they have done is wrong. It goes from beyond crime to godless sin. Just awful. So what happens if you're in that situation? You call the police. That's your first step. Call the police. If you can't get through to the police, you call 911 and you call an ambulance. You do whatever it takes to get someone to listen to you. You do what it takes to get out of that situation. If you tell somebody, I will kill your family, immediately call 911. They are lying. They're not going to do anything to you that they don't think they can get away with. Okay? They're threatening you because they think they can get you to just obey them. Don't fall for it. Get them arrested immediately. Okay? I know it sounds like I'm being like, oh, in your face, but this is a real thing. It really does happen to people. And there's way too many boys and girls. And yes, it does happen to boys too. Boys and girls who go through their lives feeling like they are somehow responsible for somebody else sexually abusing them. And that is just not the way it is. That's a lie. It's not your fault. It is not their fault. So this little girl asks very simply, will I have to go to the doctor? I'd prefer not to go to the doctor. Do I have to take my clothes off if I go to the doctor? And Sarah, knowing the background, tries to stay very calm and very controlled and says, no, you shouldn't have to. Everything will be okay. I will be right there with you. It's the bladder infection that she has from being forced into a sexual assault that she did not ask for. That's why she got the bladder infection. And that ends up really the chapter. The chapter actually ends with her spending a little time with her new grandma, even though she hasn't really said grandma yet, and realizing that she's being taken care of. No matter what happens, they are not going to abandon her. Okay, so in chapter 33, Sierra calls Kaylee in to help her make breakfast. They're having Ruby over. Yay, a lot of fun. And they realize that Kaylee has some talents that they never even dreamed of. Kaylee has spent so much time reading this book on etiquette that when she sets the table, it looks gorgeous. They say it looks like a magazine spread or a restaurant in a fancy, hotel or restaurant. So they have breakfast with Ruby, and then they go on to the doctors. Now, one of the things that's part of the routine is that when they have eaten lunch and then Kaylee's taken a nap, there's usually some kind of surprise at the end of the day. And her surprise after going to the doctor is going to be going out and getting ice cream, which is kind of cute. And then we get on chapter 34 and we get a brand new name at the front of chapter 34. Catherine. We've not met Catherine yet. But Catherine, and it's not told from her point of view. Well, it is her point of view, but it's not first person. Catherine is looking at her daughter walking into an ice cream shop with Sierra. Catherine's a homeless woman, still in the town, and watching as her daughter walks past her into this ice cream shop. And we get a little bit of Catherine's background from this chapter about when she left. She had convinced herself that Kaylee was better off without her. And now looking at her walking into the ice cream shop, that same phrase goes through, she's better off without me, she's better off without me. And then as she waits for Kaylee to come back out because she wants to see her again, make sure it's her daughter, she thinks to the last day she saw Kaylee. And it's a horrific day, honestly. It says, a quick trip. That's what she told herself when she left. But it turned into one trip after another. As she drove away from the cabin that afternoon, she argued with herself, just go to the grocery store, Kat. Just go. Drive into the parking lot. Get out of the car. Walk the aisles. Get milk, cereal, pork chops, a pack of bubblegum for Kaylee. Give the cashier the money. Give it to the cashier, Kat. Don't be an idiot. But who was she kidding? She knew where she was going. Her need was stronger than her sense, as usual, and she never made it to the store. Instead, she ended up in an apartment, a friend of Jack's. She balled her fist and pounded on his door. Randall, open up. He had to be here. Had to. The man's apartment that she went to was a drug dealer. And we find out that Catherine left her daughter so that she could take meth. She's a meth addict. As she did, she could feel the meth burning its way into her system. She coughed a choking cough and then began to relax. This is all I need, ever. This is it. With this, I can do anything. Her mind began to race. I'll leave here, go get Kaylee, and we'll start fresh. Of course, why didn't I figure that out before? But of course, she can't move forward. She has the mental image of, I can move forward, I can go, because meth is very about, it's speed. But when it comes down to actually doing it, she can't do it. She's stuck, and she's stuck in this loop, and she's stuck in this loop for so long that she ends up losing everything. She sells her body to get more methamphetamine. She has her car sold to get more methamphetamine. And finally, by the time she cannot give anymore, she is homeless. She is carless. She has nothing left to give. She has debased herself in every way imaginable to try to get more of this drug. Okay, our last chapter, and then I'll let you guys go because I know this went on and on. Sierra takes Kaylee into this ice cream parlor. They get their favorite kinds of ice cream, and then they go home. By that time, Kaylee is exhausted and she goes to bed. And Sierra hears a knock at the door. And when Sierra sees Catherine for the first time, she sees what she used to look like 12 years before. She recognizes this woman immediately as, wow, that's what I looked like 12 years ago when I was on meth. She says, it's the drugs I see, the nervousness, the involuntary twitches and movements, the pockmarks and scabs on her face. I never really had a huge acquaintanceship with drugs, illegal drugs. It's not my thing. But I did work with people who were former drug addicts, and they always had really funny stories to tell. But one of my coworkers could always spot somebody who was on drugs. I never could, but she could. Oh yeah, that person's on drugs. And I'd ask her because I was curious, and I was in college. I was an adult in college, and I'd ask her, I said, how do you know? She goes, look at the way she's picking at her face. And I'm like, that's a thing? I mean, I had pimples, that's a thing, picking at your face. She goes, yeah, because it feels like when you're on meth or when you're just coming off it feels like you have stuff crawling under your skin. And so you pick and pick and pick and pick at a specific spot on your face until you open up a sore. You actually scratch your own skin off trying to get to this itchy part underneath. And as a result, people end up with deep pockmarks or scars in their face. So I learned that from Julie. She says, I see her need, so like my own at one time, but it was not the sum of the drugs. I was not the sum of the drugs. She is not the sum of the drugs. She's looking at this woman. She goes, wow, she is a drug addict, flat out, but that's not all she is. She says, I have got to figure out who this woman is deep down inside. Okay. So as Catherine talks to her, Shannon tells her some harsh truths that you have to figure out for your homework. Stuff that was said to her by her mom, by Ruby. And then Catherine begins to rewrite history. And she says, look, my daughter was kidnapped from me in a store. That's not true. She actually didn't make it to the store. She left Kaylee at home with the dirtbag boyfriend. And then she went and got drugs, got high for a long time. So she says, my daughter was kidnapped from me from a store, and baby, you're the kidnapper, and maybe I won't turn you in if you give me a little cash. So it turns out Catherine isn't really there so much for Kaylee as she is to try to get something from this exchange. She wants money. She's willing to sell her daughter now for cash for drugs. She's lost everything, and she's still looking to make a payday so that she can get some drugs. Okay. And that's where we had to leave it off. Kaylee heard her mom talk that way and actually tried to follow her when her mom ran away, because Kaylee's mom didn't really want to have contact with Kaylee because it's embarrassing, honestly. She was embarrassed of what she had become. She was embarrassed of having abandoned Kaylee and knowing that she was lying, and Kaylee knew she was lying. So she runs off. Kaylee goes running off after her, and Sierra captures her and just says, no, I can't let you go. Okay, so that's where we're ending today. We made it all the way through chapter 25 or 35. This week, you need to read up to chapter 50, because we only have a couple of weeks left. So next Tuesday, we're going to be talking all the way through chapter 50, and then we have one more week after that, and then we're all done with this book. I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope you give some thought to the stuff that we've talked about today. Talk to you later. Bye.